Welcome to the No Pulp Podcast. I'm Carson Fowler. Beside me is Chase Avery and Sean Dempsey, these two lovely gentlemen. And we're having a conversation about college football here on the No Pulp Podcast. Our producer, Liam Griffin, will be giving us a couple teams, and we're going to say trick or treat and compare each football team to a candy based on some of their offense, some of their defense, what they're like, if they're sweet, if they're salty. That's how it's going to roll out. LG, let's hear it. Who's our first team?
The Illinois Fighting Illini.
The Illini.
Oh, okay.
The Midwest, that's my home. Oh, and Chase's home. Sorry. He's actually from Illinois.
Excuse yourself.
Chase, seems like you're excited already. Let's start with you, the Fighting Illini.
So, trick or treat. If I were to compare that team to a candy bar, I would compare it to, well, I'd compare their defense specifically to a Snickers bar because that is the king of candy.
Good take.
So, Illinois' defense is first in the country in the FBS for least amount of points given up this year. I think it's around 9 a game. Their defense has been absolutely outstanding this year, and they're a pleasure to watch for sure. Their schedule has been, I would say, a little bit on the easier side. They've played a lot of Big Ten teams. Obviously, they're in the Big Ten, but the Big Ten's not as good this year as they are in most years, I would say. Like Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin, none of those teams are ranked this year. Basically, Ohio State, Illinois, and I think one other, Michigan are the only teams that are ranked currently in the Big Ten. I think that this team is a great team, this Illinois team. It's been a while since Illinois has had a good football team. And
that is very true.
Switching to what we want to talk about, Tommy DeVito, their starting quarterback. He's great. I think transfer from Syracuse. I would personally still I like Schrader as our quarterback here in the 3-1-5, just due to him being...
Love 3-1-5.
Just
love it.
Mostly due to the fact that Schrader is a more mobile quarterback, and I think he fits better in Syracuse's offense. But I'm very happy that I get to see Tommy DeVito have success. And Illinois does have arguably the best running back in the nation. I'm blanking on his last name, but I know his first name is Chase, and he's also very fun.
I think it's Chase Brown.
Yeah.
Chase Brown.
And yeah, they're definitely a very fun team to watch. Having one of the best running backs in the country and a lockdown defense with the least amount of points given up per game, that is definitely a 1-2 punch that you don't see very often in college football.
Chase, I like that answer. That was a great answer.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go a different route here. My Illinois candy comparison is their Twizzler. Now, hear me out on this. On the surface, Illinois looks great. But actually, when you start biting into it, it's not actually that good. Okay. And my reasons for that is because they haven't even beaten a ranked opponent this season. And we've seen Tommy DeVito play in Syracuse, and I think he's a good quarterback, but I just don't trust him to lead Illinois anywhere further than where they actually are. He's thrown 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions so far this season, so pretty good compared to where he was at Syracuse.
Agreed.
But they're getting to the heart of their schedule in the second half: Nebraska, Michigan State, Purdue, and then Michigan, obviously. So I think they're just going to have a tough challenge down the stretch, kind of like a Twizzler when you're picking it.
So like a Twizzler, okay. So you guys both mentioned sort of strength of schedule, so we actually have the stats here. Power Rankings Guru has them as the 52nd in terms of strength of schedule. So really kind of middle of the pack when it comes to how strong this football team is. So I'm going to kind of throw this to you guys. Are they fraudulent? Is 18 too high? Or sorry, excuse me. 17. They are 17. So are they fraudulent? Are they valid?
I don't think they're fraudulent at all. I think the stats speak for themselves. Like I said, defense, least amount of points given up per game. This is a very good football team. I think they have a lot of similar to Syracuse, a lot of upperclassmen players that are on that team.
Agreed.
That have had a lot of experience. Chase Brown being one of them is, I think he's a fifth-year senior. And yeah, they're a very good team. I don't think they're fraudulent at all, whatsoever. I think going off what Sean said, you compared them to a Twizzler. You think they're not elite, but they're a good football team.
They're average.
They're just average.
I think they're above average. I mean,
He's a little biased.
I think they're close to the top of the pack in the Big Ten, and that's hard to do in college football. Big Ten
I agree.
is very strong.
But again, they also have to play teams like Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. But they will play Michigan.
To answer your question, Carson, I don't think they're fraudulent, but I don't think they're going to be better than 17 by the end of the season.
I agree with that. I think before we get to the next team, I think my final thought with this team is they're a really good tackling team. Like, I feel like that's where football teams, at least defensively, that's where you win games. They're really, really good tackling teams. They have 7, 8, 9 players with double-digit solo tackles. That's a really impressive stat to me. I mean, it's one that you get 25 racked up assisted tackles, but being able to tackle in the open field by yourself, when you got running back going up the gun, one-on-one, you make the tackle, you make a big play. That's probably why they only allow 9 points a game.
True.
All right, I think that's enough with the Illini. On to the next team. LG, who do we have next?
The TCU Horned Frogs.
The Horned Frogs. All right, first of all, great name, great location, great colors down in Fort Worth. So, Chase, we started with you last time. Sean, what candy is TCU and the Horned Frogs like?
All right, in my personal opinion, I relate TCU to a Three Musketeer. Now, hear me out on this. I think it's because they haven't gotten the respect they deserve because they haven't been as good in previous years compared to like some of the top teams like Alabama and Clemson. And I think they are a legit contender for the college football playoff. The front part of their season was loaded, and they're still undefeated. They've had 4 straight ranked opponents. They've beaten 4 straight ranked opponents, including number 8, Oklahoma State. And their quarterback, Max Duggan, is playing out of his mind, 19 touchdowns and 1 interception while still throwing for 70% completion percentage. That is very impressive. And I like Three Musketeers, but they're not up there with me just yet. So I want to see how they finish the season and see if they bring them to the college football playoff. We'll see.
Yeah, I would compare this team, if candy bar, I would probably go with, it's a hard one, probably a Twix. I'd probably say it's a Twix.
So what's the difference between a Snickers and a Twix, though?
Well, Twix is a little bit sweeter.
Twix a little bit sweet. Oh, so they're soft.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's a little bit of a softer team. It's they're playing the Big 12. Big 12 is usually known for a little bit more lenient defenses.
It's very true.
But
they have 4 straight ranked wins against opponents.
I think this is a very good football team, and it's nice to see TCU, who was once a very strong college football program, come back to the top. Garrett Riley was hired this past offseason, who is Lincoln Riley's brother, as their offensive coordinator, and I think he has done wonders for that team on that offense, especially with the senior quarterback in Max Duggan, like Sean said. So I don't think this team is fraudulent at all. I think it's a very good team. And yeah, they can put up a lot of numbers offensively.
Well, you mentioned numbers. They put up about 522 yards per game. That's 5 football fields, and that's good for 3rd best in all of college football. I really like this TCU team. My favorite candy is probably a Snickers as well, so that's what I'm going to give this team. I'm going to follow on the get on Chase's back here.
You're just going to copy him?
Yeah, just jump on Chase's back. Give him the Snickers. It's also my favorite candy. No, but I think you guys hit it on the nail on the head. I think this team is really solid all around. They got a really good offense. They got a decent defense. Max Duggan is obviously phenomenal. 19 touchdowns. 19 interceptions would not be that good. 19 touchdowns, 1 interception is really solid. And Sean, I see no reason why this team can make the college football playoff. They have been some really talented teams. It's not like they're not playing anybody. Obviously, the Big 12 isn't as good probably as the SEC, Big 10. I'd say it's probably better than the Pac-12, but that's probably up for discussion. That'll be another episode of the No Pulp Podcast.
I'm looking at it right now. The 4 teams they've beaten: Oklahoma, Kansas, who's very good this year, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State. So they're a legit team, and if they keep beating these teams that aren't as good and beat the games that they should be just fine.
I totally agree. And they're 7-0, and they effectively have a 2-game lead over everyone else in the Big 12. I think this team's going to win the Big 12 championship and put themselves in a really good place to make the college football playoff. I just think you got it. Here's a question for you guys before we go on to the next team. Alabama, Georgia, and then you have TCU. Mm-hmm. So, okay, Alabama, Georgia will likely play for the SEC championship. That's usually what it looks like. That's what it's been like the last couple of years. If one of these two teams, obviously they're winning, one of them's going to have to lose. Do you put an 11-1 Alabama or an 11-1 Georgia over an undefeated TCU in the Big 12 championship?
That's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah.
No, I don't think TCU is better than either of those teams.
You said yes, you would put them in.
No, I would not put TCU.
You'd put an 11
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
But then you kind of see the SEC bias come in here. Yeah. Can they put multiple teams into the college football playoff? I don't know. That's where it's going to come down to the committee.
Because what? I think college football is probably going to be Ohio State, I think they're going to roll through the Big Ten.
Yeah.
They have just looked unstoppable against good teams there. Obviously, they haven't played Michigan yet. I really want to see how that game looks. They've got a really good rushing attack as well. So Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, maybe. Although they struggled last week against Syracuse. Obviously, I think Syracuse is a pretty good football team.
I think
I'm a little biased, but
I think every team ahead of TCU right now is better than TCU. I don't. Think
Okay,
that, I think I like where they're placed in the AP polls. I like that they're at 7. I don't think they should be any higher than that.
I like that too.
Yeah.
I agree. All right, LG, I think that's all we have with TCU and the Horned Frogs. Who do we have next on this Halloween weekend?
Joe Burrow is going to love this one. The Tigers of LSU.
The Tigers of LSU down in Baton Rouge. They got good golfing weather down there, boys.
Yeah.
So, in LSU, Brian Kelly, the Tigers, Chase, you're first.
Let's hear it.
So trick or treat. I would compare this team. This is a tough one, but I'd compare them to a Skittles probably.
I really like Skittles. Okay.
Taste the rainbow. I think there's a lot of variety.
Okay.
Taste the rainbow.
There's a lot of variety with this team. But you get some bad, not so great Skittles. You know, I'm more of a fan of the red Skittles and maybe the green ones, but the rest of them are just not what I'm trying to put it
how
out.
does this compare to
So let's
LSU?
roll this out. So you said what you have to say about the candy. Let's talk about the football team.
So I'm going to say week 1, I remember watching this team against Florida State where they just kind of blew it there at the end of the game.
Agreed.
Yep.
And everyone threw a fit. Like, Brian Kelly, you brought in this guy for them to lose to Florida State week 1. I understand that. I think it's a very good team, however. They did get crushed by – I don't think they're elite. I don't think this program's elite.
I agree. I agree with that.
And it's going to take a while for Brian Kelly to grab the reins and make this team a top 5 team in the nation. Losing to Tennessee 40-13 is, like, terrible.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, what people expected, but it just goes to show that this team is far away from being elite. They kind of remind me a little bit of last year's Florida team, or
Like kind of all over the place, but still kind of hanging in
better,
there.
yeah.
Okay.
But I think, I don't know. I'm not too, like, enthralled in.
You're not very high on this
sold on
LSU team.
No,
Okay.
not at all. Yeah.
Sean, I think you're eyeing him. I think you have a dirty take here. Okay.
So, well, I think my candy comparisons to teams are pretty good. So,
I agree.
LSU is a Snickers. Would you like to know why?
Dude, so we've gotten Snickers.
Because
That might be the candy of the day.
Brian Kelly, you're not you when you're hungry, all right?
Oh,
You like that one? You like that one?
This guy taking advertising.
So with Snickers, I don't know how to feel about Snickers. I like them sometimes, and I don't like them other times. That's kind of how I feel about LSU. They'll go in and beat Ole Miss at home, but also lose to Florida and Auburn and get killed by Florida State. So I don't know where this
It's like
team.
this Florida team last year.
I don't know where this team stands for me at all. I think they can beat some of the best teams in the country. They can also lose some terrible games. That's why I kind of put them in the middle right now. Jaden Daniels leads the team in passing and rushing yards, their quarterback, which is outstanding, 9 total rushing touchdowns this season. So he can definitely do it all, but I'm not really sold on this team completely. That's why they're Snickers for me.
I'm with that. I kind of like where Chase was at. I also like where you're at. I think giving this team, like, not being too high, but also, like, understanding that it's Brian Kelly's first year.
Yeah.
It's a new place, new team. He's putting in his offense as the year goes on.
Like, Snickers has some time to grow on me, just like LSU.
So I'm trying to think of a candy for me. Like, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna do Almond Joy. I like a little coconut, but it's like sometimes, like, I don't love it. But I am a guy of coconut, so I do like this team. They also have got great colors. That's, like, very much a factor. You know, it's Halloween.
Okay.
You gotta have a good costume, good colors. Listen, you hit a really good point with Jaden Daniels. He's probably maybe the best dual threat quarterback in college football.
Yep.
He averages 4.5 yards per rush attempt, 7.5 yards per passing attempt. Really solid. I want to see how this team plays against Alabama come next weekend.
I agree.
That's on November 5th. They get the bye this week, so they've got a lot of time. Some of these guys will get healthy, rest, and regroup before taking on a really, really talented team in the Tide. It's at home, though, in what I believe is the real Death Valley. But they're atop the SEC West right now.
The issue with this team is, I'm looking at the stats right now, they're defense is not SEC.
It's atrocious. I agree.
They have 450 yards on offense per game, which is tremendous, like absolutely amazing. Giving up 350 yards per game on the defensive side of the ball, you can't win like that in the SEC. That's not you can't. It's not going to happen, and it's going to take a while for Brian Kelly to recruit and build up that southern recruiting, southern recruiting. It's out of his comfort zone. I mean, in South Bend, Indiana, it's like you have more control of the Midwest, and but now
there's more competition down south
for sure. Yeah. And he's gonna have to learn how to deal with that. But yeah, I think this team, it's gonna be 2 or 3 years before it can get back on. If he does it the right way.
I agree with that.
I'm also not super high on Brian Kelly in general. I didn't think he was great with Notre Dame. I think he's going to be solid here. I don't really understand why LSU went this route with him.
It was like a name brand hire.
I agree. I think he's a good coach. I just don't think he's the coach that you want come college ball playoff time. You're going up against an Alabama, a Georgia, an Ohio State.
Brian Kelly
is not your guy. I think we've talked enough about the Tigers down in Baton Rouge. LG, let's get up to the next team on the ballot. Give it to me.
How about the Kansas State Wildcats?
Wow.
Interesting.
Okay, so I feel like, before we kind of kick this off, I'm just giving my thought first. I feel like this team's kind of come onto the scene recently. Kansas State is not really, this is a basketball school to me, in my opinion.
Yes.
This is Syracuse
This is Syracuse, yeah, that's a good comparison.
I feel like really blown some people out of the water, and no one's kind of seen this coming. I didn't see this coming for Kansas State. Like, I was not looking at this team. I think this candy...
Going into the season,
I could not agree more.
No.
I think, to me, this candy is a peanut butter M&M's. Listen, it's a new candy. It's only been around a little while.
I see where you're going with this.
But it's really solid. It's like, like peanut butter, chocolate, little candies. It's a winner. That's what it is.
I like that one.
Chase?
That's a hard one. I think I would compare this candy to...
You're comparing a candy to a candy?
No, I'm sorry. I'm comparing Kansas State to probably a Kit Kat.
To a Kit Kat, okay.
Why?
Good candy.
I
Great
think,
candy.
It's either left Kit Kat or right Kit Kat, and I usually start with the left one. However...
Is that like a superstition?
I don't know. I'm not a huge Kit Kat guy.
Yeah, neither am I. Are you?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not a huge Kit Kat guy. I'm not a huge Kansas State
So lame.
guy. Let's be real.
Okay.
I think this team has done a very easy strength of schedule so far. They did beat Oklahoma, which is very good. I think they're going to get clapped by Oklahoma State tomorrow. I really like Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn is their junior running back. As a running back myself, he is one of the most fun players to watch, given he's 5'6" and 175 pounds. And he
make defenders miss.
He makes defenders miss. He's a very fun player to watch, very great. Yeah, he's definitely someone when you turn on the TV and you watch Kansas State play, you're like, oh, Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah.
He hasn't put great numbers up this year. I don't know if it's because he's been injured or what. I mean, it's pretty solid, like 750 yards rushing so far, only 4 touchdowns, but I don't know. This team's not like much to write home about, to be honest with you. 5-2 in the Big 12. They eyed.
That's all I got.
So for me, I would put Kansas State as a Sour Patch Kid.
Okay.
So hear me out on this. They look great on the surface, right? But then you start eating it and you get a little disappointed. It's a little sour. Like you don't really know how to feel about a Sour Patch Kid. And that's how I feel about Kansas State with their starting quarterback getting injured with no timetable to return, Adrian Martinez. So I don't know where this team's going to finish the season. They started out great. Like you said, their strength of schedule isn't fantastic, but they did have some quality wins against Oklahoma, Texas Tech, lost to TCU, but that's understandable. They're going in playing Oklahoma State next, Texas, Baylor, West Virginia. I just don't know if they can get it done, especially if their quarterback isn't 100% healthy. And the main attack of this team is the rushing attack, and that is kind of important when you have a quarterback who can run but also throw as well.
I also think in general when your rushing attack is the majority of your offense, I think you should win a lot of football games.
Yes.
Usually the team that wins the trenches runs it vertical, gets north and south really fast,
dominate
easy.
The line of scrimmage.
Exactly, and I think they did that last week against TCU. They're up 28-10, and they simply they fell apart.
Yep.
They gave up 28 straight points to TCU. We talked about TCU earlier. They're a really solid football team. Chase, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I think this Kansas State team is pretty good. I think strength of schedule tells a lot, and their strength of schedule is 9th in the nation. They're 5-2. They played some really solid opponents. I think this also says a lot about the Big 12.
Yeah.
Okay, this is where I bring the take back a little bit. I think you put Kansas State in the SEC. I don't think they handle that any of those
That's just like the difference of the conferences. I mean,
agree,
SEC typically has great defenses.
Right.
Big 12, completely different.
I think it'll be really interesting and fun to see when they play Kansas on November 26th. Kansas is not like a great team on paper. However, they lost to
They're really good this year.
They lost to
better
TCU.
than years past, for sure.
They've lost like close games, like TCU 31-38 against. They're not ranked, but like they lost 31-38 against TCU.
Right.
42-52 against Oklahoma. So they're gonna put up a fight. It's a huge rivalry, Kansas State, Kansas. Kansas usually known as a basketball school. However, I think that'll be fun to watch at the last week of the regular season this year.
I'm really excited for tomorrow's matchup at 3:30 with Oklahoma State, taking on that's not the Hokies. They're the Pokes, right? Sorry, Pokes. I think that'll be a really interesting game. They're coming off what was a terrible loss to TCU, I would believe in their minds. It's not a bad loss in terms of who they played, but that was the game they should have won. They had their foot on the neck of TCU, took it off, weren't driving anymore, fell off. So, all right, LG. Next up on the ballot, who do we have? We just talked about Kansas State. Give it to me.
Are the Tennessee Volunteers playoff bound?
The Vols.
I like that.
I think that's so funny. We talked about Alabama and Georgia, and I just completely forgot that Tennessee
this year
beat Alabama. Sorry, I totally misspoke earlier. Alabama's not undefeated, so that makes it really interesting. Before we
I'm really excited about this one, Carson.
Bring it on Tennessee. I know you're excited. Before we get to Tennessee, between Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama, let's just say Tennessee goes on to the SEC championship, undefeated, but then loses to Alabama.
You still put Tennessee in, if that's your question.
Okay, so I think if I have it right with the SEC standings, Georgia would make it, and so it'd be between Georgia and Tennessee, and Alabama's going to make it. So Georgia will probably be 11-1. Tennessee will probably be undefeated. Alabama will be 11-1. If Alabama beats Tennessee,
that gets
Alabama,
tricky.
Georgia, and Tennessee get the college football playoff?
I don't know.
Probably not.
So. No, you can't do that.
Who do you leave out?
No. Alabama. Or Tennessee. It's the winner
Even
of that game. It's the winner of that game.
So you think the winner of the SEC
goes to college
so then
football
Georgia would not get in?
I guess.
Well, I think also you have to. I don't know. You have to remember that Michigan-Ohio State game is also
one of them to lose as well.
Has not been played yet, and that's going to be big.
I'm a little biased. I'm from Ohio, but I think
Michigan's at 4 right now, and Ohio State's at 2. That game is going to be
it's detrimental
every single year. That game, makes or breaks the college football playoff. Sometimes, it seems
completely agree,
because only usually one team from the Big Ten. Usually from the Big Ten, makes the college football playoff. It's been Ohio State.
Yep.
So that game will kind of help determine that a little bit.
I agree.
I think. So that's definitely going to be a result. But no, from what you just said, I don't think that you can
get 3 of them. Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
All right, that's enough about the college football playoff. We're here to talk about the Tennessee Volunteers. They took down the goalpost the other week against Alabama. Did. This team is legit. This is a really good football team. This is not a team we've seen in a long time in Tennessee, in Knoxville.
Can I start on this one?
Oh, Sean, I was going to give it to Chase.
So
you got it.
Tennessee is a Reese's for me. It's an oldie, but it's
Chocolate
a goodie.
And peanut butter just always goes together.
The offense, the defense, everything about it. I absolutely love Tennessee this year. A lock for the college football playoff, in my personal opinion.
Agreed.
They've typically been a basketball school, but over the past 10 years, now it's looking like they're a dominant team in college football, beating Alabama in the Crimson Tide. Like I said, they took down Alabama, and they've won 3 of their last 4 games have been against ranked opponents. So that's where I like to see the strength of schedule coming in with that. And Hendon Hooker looks like Vince Young out there on the field, 18 touchdowns and only 1 interception all season. So he's been carrying the offense. I just don't see anybody who can stop this team as they move down the stretch of this season.
I agree.
Chase?
Yeah, that's a really good comparison. The
Thank
Reese's
you.
Cups,
I thought so. It was my favorite one, actually.
I can get behind that. I'm trying to think of what they are, but what are those like?
It's just everything about them that you like.
I'm trying to think. What are those chocolate things that it takes a while to chew? You know what I'm talking about?
Mounds? No. Rolos?
Rolos.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
mhm. It's because like Tennessee hasn't been this.
I haven't had a Rolo in a long time.
Tennessee has not been this great. I love chocolate, and Tennessee has not been this great in a long time. And it's hard to get behind, but you got to get used to it.
Okay.
It's true.
So I think I would compare it to that. Yeah, like Sean said, Hendon Hooker, who is top for probably the Heisman candidate right now at the current moment. He's been absolutely phenomenal. 2,100 yards passing so far this year. Yeah, watching that Tennessee-Alabama, I mean, that game
was incredible.
It was a basketball score.
That was
50 to 49.
That was the game of the year.
Great.
I think we'll see about Michigan, Ohio State, like I said, but I think that so far that was the game this year. College game day was there. I think this team has a real reason that they can say why they should be put in the college football playoff.
Agreed.
Now, do I think that this team will win it all? Probably not. I don't think they have the experience yet.
I got an answer for this.
Put there, but I think that they definitely have a real reason to be put in the college football playoff at the moment.
So, I think this team's really solid. I do not think they're going to beat Georgia on November 5th. It's not going to happen. This offense is really good, and they carry this team.
Yeah.
But they allow 420 yards on defense. They just haven't. That's not the.
You're not going to win.
No,
like
against
that.
a Georgia defense that allows under 8 points a game. I don't care how good your offense is. Offense buys tickets. Defense wins championships. That's always been the name of the game. I think Georgia's going to blow this team out the water. Listen, because you're putting two offenses that are really good up against each other, but when Georgia's defense can keep their offense on the field, I think we're going to see like a 30-10 game. And I'm not saying Tennessee's a bad football team.
It's just Georgia's really good.
I just think Georgia's really, really right. They're the number one team in the country.
Yep.
They want to defend their title. This is a team that's going to do some things.
And once you get to the college football playoff, there's these teams. It's going to be a lot of air raid offense. Their teams aren't going to be necessarily running the ball on the ground.
They're not going to play conservative. They're playing to win.
Exactly. And this, if you look defensively, Tennessee, their leader for sacks, has 3.5 sacks this year. 7 games in. That's not a pass rush. That's not a pass rush defense. And when you get to, like you said, play teams in the college football playoffs like Georgia, they're gonna be Stetson Bennett's gonna be slinging it. They're gonna bring it with everything they got. Their wide receivers are just gonna go nuts. They're not gonna really run it down your throat. It's gonna be a lot. And if that's your defense at the current moment, with your leader on defense has 3.5 sacks. That's not going to be national championship worthy.
I agree.
So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, we talked a lot about the college football playoff. We talked a lot about Tennessee. LG, give me the next team, please.
Quack, quack, quack. It's the Oregon Ducks.
Okay. All right.
I'm not. Oh, how would I compare this team?
Usually the host goes first.
Yeah. Why don't you?
And then I know you're excited about the Ducks. We're all excited about Nike, green and yellow, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Chase, you already started us off, so why don't you just do your thing?
Take it away.
I'll stop. I'll stop.
So
I'll sit back and watch.
I compare this team to Fruit Roll Up.
Fruit Roll, okay.
Whoa. Whoa.
I think they're. It's a very.
Is Fruit Roll Up really a candy though?
They're a very.
I'll give it to them.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a very weird team. First year without Mario Cristobal as head coach. And then I remember watching this team against Georgia and them just getting absolutely knocked around. And I don't think this team is not elite, and they're in the middle of the pack. I think they're always for these next couple of years going to be a top. I don't think they're not top. Yeah, they're not a top 10 team.
Yeah.
I love Justin Flo, one of their linebackers. He was one of the highest recruits coming out of high school. He's an interior linebacker. I think they do have a pretty solid defense, and I think Bo Nix transferring from Auburn was a great decision for him. But I'm not too high on this team.
You want me to go? So Oregon for me is like M&Ms.
Okay. You got to back this up.
The
You're
regular
giving them
M&Ms. So hear me out. I got it. Because they get better and better as you eat them in the pack. But I don't usually go for M&Ms when I'm looking for a candy. So they're not my favorite candy, but as I keep eating them, I like them better and better. And that's how I feel about this Oregon team. Started off the season slow, 49-3 loss to Georgia, as you said. So obviously that doesn't really support my statement of eating them. But as the season's gone on, I'm starting to like them better, as we've seen over their schedule, just beat UCLA, Arizona, Stanford, Washington State, a ranked BYU team.
Chase is shaking his head over here.
I like the direction this team is going after starting off poor. That's my M&M comparison.
No.
Let's hear it.
They're in the Pac-12. Like, it's like the only teams that I think that they've played that are like valid has been like Georgia and UCLA. I don't think BYU is.
I think BYU sucks
Well,
straight up.
Every year BYU just like they're kind of like they're not because
compare them to a candy.
I'm trying to think. Are they? They're in the Pac-12. Right?
BYU, no, they're in the Mountain West.
Mountain
Yeah.
That's the problem. It's like they seem kind of like their schedule every year is kind of like Notre Dame's. Like they're an independent team. Like they kind of just like
all over the place.
Yeah, and so I really think the only valid teams they played are Georgia and UCLA, and I think that win against UCLA this past week was big. Like I think that, but they're not back.
No,
the rest of their schedule: California, Colorado, Washington, Utah, Oregon State. That is like, none of those teams are anything to write home about, and I think.
I'm not saying this team's gonna make the college football playoff, but I'm saying that for Bo Nix being in Oregon, throwing for 17 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, and he just played good in a big game.
No.
He doesn't typically do that. So I like the direction this team is going, just like my pack of M&Ms.
Yeah.
All right, so hear me out here. I'm kind of with Chase here. I really don't think this Oregon team is good. I think they're like Tennessee's little brother. Defense not so good.
Okay.
Offense is good. They put up a lot of points, just above 42. No, I'm not comparing. I'm saying he's the little brother. He's like, it's not a comparison, but they're a little bit worse, a little bit shorter, not as fast. They're 8th in the country, which I think is a little absurd. I want to see this team play USC. I think USC is a more legit football team. They're 6-1. They'll likely meet in the Pac-12 football championship. Mm-hmm. Look, I'm looking at the standings. You got 6-1 Oregon, 6-1 USC, 6-2 Utah, 6-1 UCLA. Pretty solid Oregon State team. But I don't think those teams stack up against some of the SEC teams, some of the Big Ten teams, even some of the Big 12 teams. I think you have to, strength of schedule is a very important factor I'm thinking about. And that's why I think, so college basketball has moved towards the net rankings, which talks about, it incorporates a quad 1 win versus a quad 2, quad 3, quad 4.
They just don't have that.
And they don't have that in college football, which is understandable. Well, they just play less games. It's harder to gauge what is considered a quad 1 win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The issue is their biggest game of the year came week 1 against Georgia, and it's similar.
And they flopped.
And it's similar to how last year I remember they played Ohio State week 2, and they beat Ohio State 35-28 last year, and like that was huge, and everyone was like, oh, if Oregon makes a run this year, like they may be back into the college football playoff if they go.
Let me ask you this though, Chase. Yeah. Would the Oregon team right now would have played way better than week 1?
I totally agree with that. 100%. I don't think they would have won.
No, I don't think they would have either, but I think it would have been like a 10-point game.
The fact that they played him week 1 was like.
That's a tough ask, especially for Bo Nix in his first game.
And it was at a.
It was a neutral site. I think it was in Atlanta, right?
Which. It's like, also there's probably a lot of Georgia fans there. I mean,
it is in Georgia.
I would hope so.
I'm sure the Bulldogs travel well when it comes to the fan base.
I was very confused when they scheduled that game for that time and being in a neutral site.
Well, I think they thought that it was gonna be a better game.
Yeah.
No, they thought they were gonna lose 49-3.
Yeah. So that was definitely like a tough pill to swallow. And if I was on like the Oregon team, like I'd be mad that was like their week 1 opponent was Georgia.
Mm-hmm. All right, we talked a lot about Oregon. Let's get to our next team, LG. Handing off to you.
It's a homegrown one this time. Your Syracuse Orange.
All right.
Awesome.
The Orange. Sean, you've got the Syracuse polo on, so I figure you'll start. But I low-key think Syracuse is real. I think you go and you play Clemson really tough, in Death Valley, they've won 56 of their last 57 matchups. They don't call it Death Valley for nothing.
All right, Carson, hear me out.
Okay.
Syracuse is a Kit Kat, right?
Okay.
Because they may have broken off one Kit Kat with a loss, but that doesn't mean that their season's over.
I
right?
agree with that.
Garrett Schrader is a legit quarterback. We can all agree on that. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
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 I just don't think he's the quarterback you want in those tight games that we had.
He doesn't have experience with it.
He's not the guy you want when you're down 3. It's the last play of the drive. This is the legacy drive.
They give it to Sean Tucker.
Sean Tucker looks like the next version of Saquon Barkley. Shout out my Giants.
Quadzilla.
But
he's a great player.
yes, they're a Kit Kat because they're good. And just because they lost one game, I don't think Syracuse should be disappointed. Yes,
no.
SU should have won that game. They won the turnover battle. They were up 21-10 at one point. However, they should still be happy with how they performed because
100%.
they weren't expected to win that game whatsoever.
Totally agree.
I said to my dad, I think like if they beat the spread and like stay within a 1-score game, like I'm happy. Like I'm obviously not happy that they didn't win the game. Like
right.
They didn't win the game, but if they stay within 1 score, that would be huge. And
yes.
they did that. And do you know? I remember I saw someone on Twitter. One of Syracuse athletics reporters said, "Do you know Baby Ruth was going onto his like weekly radio talk show, and that was the first time this season where people have applauded him as he went up to like the desk or whatever." And I think rightfully so. They stayed within 1 score against the Clemson Tigers and are 6-1 right now.
With that game too, going in, I was like, okay, if they keep it close, or we're gonna know the story of the game by the end of the first quarter.
Yeah.
And we did. So
okay, so this is, to me, it's a Tootsie Roll. I think this is a tough football team. Mm-hmm. The defense is good. We have a really solid rushing attack. Like I said before, North and the South, we like to run the football. The Syracuse football team likes to run the football. They have a really good running back in Sean Tucker and dual threat in Garrett Schrader. We've already talked about that. Clemson, what they did in that game to get back into it was all defense.
Yep.
4 turnovers, and we only score off one of them, which ends up being a fumble recovery touchdown. You can't win. You can't win. You have to take. That's where you got to step on their throat and finish that game. You get the ball in the middle of the field, go down and score. You cannot do a 3-and-out 3 times against the number 5 football team in America. It's never gonna happen. Again, a lot of credit to Clemson. They're a great team. I thought Brian Brzee played phenomenal. He absolutely shredded what is the offensive line for Syracuse. Mm-hmm. But they also did a really good job of doing a lot of like read option defenses. So they're watching the quarterback, making him make the play, and keeping the ball out of Sean Tucker's hands, which they did a really good job.
Well, Garrett Schrader finished the game with 21 rushing attempts, which is his season high by far.
That's insane.
And Dino Babers, after the game, a reporter asked him why did Sean Tucker only get the ball 5 times, and he said because of the read option, they just forced Garrett Schrader to win the game.
And that's not how Syracuse wins games.
No,
it's
not at all.
Also, I don't like that at all for Garrett Schrader. He's getting hit 20 times. I saw him in the dining hall earlier this week. Guy had a wrist wrap on, he had an ankle wrap. He just looked defeated, simply put. But we got a couple more teams we got to hit on before we get out of here. So LG, give it to me, the next team, please. Need it.
You need this? How about the Wake Forest Demon Deacons?
The Wake Forest Demon Deacons.
Okay.
In Salem.
Interesting.
Winston-Salem. Chase, you already don't seem very high on this team whatsoever.
I just, I'm not a huge Wake Forest fan, to be honest with you. How would I compare this team to a candy?
Guys, they didn't accept him into their school, so he's a little biased.
I'd probably compare them to, a gobstopper.
What?
What is a gobstopper? I don't even know what that is.
I thought that was from Willy Wonka.
No,
that's a real thing?
No. Those, big...
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay.
You don't chew them. I don't know. I don't like Wake Forest, so I can't really.
Just because you don't like him doesn't. You're just gonna make him a gobstopper just because you don't like him.
I don't.
They've got a gauntlet of a schedule coming up too.
They do. NC State and UNC.
And then Syracuse.
Yeah, those are.
That's 3 really difficult games, and 2 of those 3 games are on the road.
Yeah. They played Clemson really hard also.
Putting up 45 on Clemson's pretty impressive.
Really so impressive. Are you kidding me? Wake Forest, for me, is a Hershey's Kiss. Okay? This team is sweet. like a Hershey's Kiss. Everything about it's sweet. I like it. You know what I mean? They put up a great amount of points against Clemson. Like we said, they should have won that game. And they're legit. Hershey's Kiss is one of my favorite candies, actually, guys. And Wake Forest is one of my favorite teams. Yeah. No bias. Syracuse, obviously, is going to be the toughest game for them going down the stretch. And it's going to be interesting to see how they finish off the season, because if they finish undefeated, they're, 6 or 7 in the country, I would say, depending on who loses in front of them. They have multiple playmakers on their teams and probably one of the best throwing quarterbacks in the entire country. Yeah. He's incredible.
21 touchdowns and 3 interceptions speaks for itself.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a pretty good football team. They've got some really really solid leadership in Sam Hartman. I think this team's kind of mid, though. They're 6-1. They play Clemson well. They're fine. I'm looking at some of their.
I don't see how you can say they're mid, though, because going into these next 3 games will really decide what kind of football team.
I'm just looking at their schedule. They beat Liberty by 1. They beat Florida State. At Florida State, that's pretty impressive. Army. Just some of these games. Army, Vanderbilt, Liberty, VMI.
Just a little too close for comfort.
Well, their only real games are against Florida State and Clemson. Which they played well, but they didn't. They barely beat Florida State. They didn't beat Clemson. I'll be really interested to see how this team plays against NC State, North Carolina, Syracuse.
See what happens.
You win those 3 games. Who knows?
You're sold.
Yeah. But right now, it doesn't do it for me.
I would say Sam Hartman is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, I think. 21 touchdowns and 3 interceptions while throwing for 1,800 yards is not something that should be taken.
Would you call him about that, Chase? You would call him about that.
I think that he's a very good quarterback.
So you're not going to answer my question? You're not going to call home? You're going to call home about that? Because you said earlier you wouldn't call him about Tennessee.
I wouldn't write home.
You would write home. But you would write home about this guy.
I think Sam Hartman is I think he's a
yes, he's gonna write home, guys.
I think he's a tremendous quarterback, and he wasn't supposed to play this year. I remember at the beginning of the season, he had some sort of medical issue that he didn't disclose. But I think that he's definitely top in the country quarterbacks wise, and that's definitely a major reason why they're in the position that they're in. However, this defense has only had 5 interceptions so far this year.
Gotta win the turnover battle.
You do, and that's kind of just interesting to me. They've obviously given up a lot. It's their offense that has carried, and they've given up a lot of points this year. So we'll see. Like you said, they have 3 really hard games, really, in the rest of the season, and if they win them, they could definitely end up at 6 or 7 in the polls, and if they lose, they could drop. I think
20.
Yeah. 20. Yeah, it could go either way. Yeah. All right. I think we have one more team before we get out of here on the podcast. LG, who's our last guy?
We do indeed have one more, and it is the Tulane Green Wave.
Okay, all right.
Just to preface, my ex-girlfriend goes to Tulane, so I already don't like this team for what it is. I'm just kidding. Sean, tell me about the Green Wave?
The Green Wave.
Green Wave.
So Tulane is Mike and Ike's for me.
That's a great candy.
They're underrated, but haven't gotten the credibility that they deserve just yet. Just because this isn't typically a football school. People go to the school because it's great for academics or whatever, but not a football school. So
you were not good at academics.
They haven't beaten anyone that really stands out to me except for Kansas State. And Memphis is a solid win too, I guess you could say. I love the rushing attack from this team, though. The quarterback and running back combining for 14 touchdowns so far this season is fantastic. However, they made it into the top 25, which is the main storyline for this team, but I don't know if they're going to stay there, and they just don't impress me. I need to see a tougher strength of schedule from them to really sell me. Chase?
Yeah, if I could compare this team to a candy bar, what would it be? It'd probably be a Hershey's.
Why?
I don't know. It's kind of bland and what everyone gets kind of thing.
You don't like Hershey's?
Not really.
Okay.
It's pretty it's pretty normal candy bar. Like Sean said, strength of schedule, not
extremely
really
mediocre.
Great, very, and they lost to Southern Miss. So
they lost to Southern Miss.
I really don't know how this is a top 25 team.
I don't either.
Other than they have 1 loss so far.
That's the only reason why.
That's really the only.
I think Cincinnati's going to blow them out.
Yeah, I agree.
Last week, I think Cincinnati's a legit football team. This team is not.
They're not it.
They're good.
They don't have the X factor.
No, they do not have the X factor. It's the green wave. Listen, I think that's all we've got on the No Pulp Podcast. This has been Carson Fowler, Sean Dempsey, Chase Avery, these two lovely gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
It's been fun.